Let's start out with the White Rabbit again. Prairie Dog to the left. Plates.
The Ermox X-Fire. Some people would call it the Crossfire, but as far as I can tell from everything I've found, it's the X-Fire. This is a budget, maybe Glock alternative. Let's take a look at it. All right, thanks for stopping by today while we take a look at another budget Glock alternative. This is the Ermox X-Fire. This is just how it came in a nice cardboard box with a plastic box on the inside that actually is kind of decent. Okay, I'm going to turn it around so we can open the thing up. And nice carrying case for the box. It does have, of course, the manual in it, which, okay, a typical manual. It's missing a couple things I'll talk about a little bit later if I remember to. Let's see, extra set of red plastic grips. You can get a whole bunch of different color aluminum grips also, I believe, off their website. I haven't found out exactly how to get them or how much yet, but they're certainly shown there. Let's see, 2 Glock Clone magazines. We'll talk about those also. The gun itself, and the case is already cut out for an optic if you want to put that the gun in here with an optic on it. It actually has a couple of mounting plates, which we'll also talk about. And finally, this is not a suppressor, much as it looks like one. It's a cleaning kit, and does have, I'm not going to take it apart, but does have cleaning rods, brushes, whatever, as well as an Allen wrench on it. So the gun is relatively similar to a Glock 19, with a couple of exceptions. Ermox Defense is actually a Turkish company, and the X-Fire is an interesting Glock Clone pistol, but it's not exactly a Glock. They do say that this is uncompromising performance and power, breaking boundaries and shattering expectations. Well, that's advertising. I'm not into marketing, but they got to say things like that. Not quite what I would call shattering expectations. However, this is, in a lot of ways, comparable to a Glock 19. And put them side by side, and a lot of similarities there. The length is about the same, height's about the same, and of course one would expect that because they do take Glock magazines. Here's a genuine Glock magazine, and here is the Ermox Defense Glock magazine. Boy, that's a copy if I ever saw one. The only difference is it doesn't have that little indentation right there that the Glock magazine has, and doesn't say Glock on the bottom. But other than that, they are interchangeable. It also works with PMags, same thing, and we shot it with all of them. We'll get around to that here in just a couple of minutes. Big difference, though, is the Ermox has a metal frame versus the Glock's polymer frame. And you can see the big difference on that too. The frame weight for the Ermox, just the frame alone, is a 10.5 ounces versus 4.6 ounces for just the bare polymer frame on the Glock. Overall, though, it's not as drastically different because the slide is a little bit lighter, probably due in part to the cuts here in the front of the slide. But overall, the Glock weighs 31.5 ounces with a magazine and 18 rounds of 124 grain ammo, whereas the Ermox X-Fire weighs 36.6 ounces, so really about 5 ounces heavier, and that's going to be reflected in 6 ounces more in the frame and an ounce less in the slide, so that comes out about right. There are a lot of similarities, but there are some differences. Let's start with the top and work our way down. True glow, fiber optic, red front sight, green rear, and as long as they're on the sight, I've got a problem with the sights. Now, if you shoot just the 3 dots, you try to line up the red fiber optic in the center of the 2 greens in the back. All right, great for quick action, but you can see that there is really no contrast. No light differentiation between the front and the rear sight. That rear sight actually seems to taper right there, and makes it very narrow. And I like to shoot equal height, equal light, and if you can't see a light definition on each side of the front sight, it's really hard to get precision. Now, a lot of people say, I just line up the dots anyway. Well, okay, that's fine for quick, but it's really much harder to line up 3 spheres and get them exactly evenly spaced than it is to line up the right angles of the sights. So, and again, I'm used to precision shooting at greater distances, so I like to line up the metal. Anyway, the sights, they do the job for what you need. It's just much harder to get real precise shots at greater distances. But again, this is not meant for great distances. This is it's a defensive pistol. All right, it has cuts in the slide to make it a little bit lighter. It does have an optics plate on it, and this will take a variety of optics. Does come with 2 additional plates in the or 2 actual optics plates in the case. This is just a cover plate on there. The rear sight stays when you put an optic on. However, they're not suppressor height, so you'd have to replace the sights if you're going to use co-witness, which is what I'd certainly want to do if I ever carry this thing. And for those who like to hang stuff from their defensive gun, it does have a rail on it. Concealed carry, not so much. Maybe home defense, you might want to put a light on, but you got to remember, you use this with a light on it to identify your target. You may have committed a felony, so use your handheld light for identifying your target. Anyway, I'm not going to. It's a tangent I'll get off on elsewhere. Interesting shape. It does have a little more contour than the Glock. Does not have finger grooves on the front. A slight undercut to the trigger guard. Very, very usable magazine release. And okay, this is a Glock magazine, and of course people always talk about how the magazine shoots out. Well, that's all a result of the follower pushing on the bottom of the slide. Get a little bit, okay, it'll work. But very usable. Also, there's a little bit of an overhang in the back of the grip, which you don't get on the Glock. And the overhang on the Glock is nice because if you ever get a stuck magazine, then you can grab the magazine a lot easier than you can with the Ermox with that overhang, but it does give a nice feel to the hand. The frame itself really feels substantial. I like it. I like the feel overall, and I'm a Glock guy. I carried a Glock for 24 years on duty. If you watch some of my other videos, I've talked about that. So I've got nothing at all against Glocks, but this just does feel a little bit better in the hand. It's just got grooves on the front. It's not checkering by any means. Helps with a little bit of up and down grip, not so much side to side. Same thing on the back of the grip. And grip panels are plastic. Again, they've got some sort of checkering texture to them. Every bit as much traction as I get on the grip panel that I do on a Glock, although the front and rear on the Glock, this is a Gen 4, is a little more texture than on the X-Fire. Internals, let's take this apart briefly. Take the magazine out, that helps. And by the way, for YouTube manual reviewers, disassembling the gun is required for cleaning and maintenance, but we're going to do a quick comparison with the Glock when we take this apart. All right, frames, let's start with that. Obviously a whole lot lighter frame, but you can see there's a lot of similarities, and at first glance it almost looks like everything is identical on the inside, but there are some subtle differences. If you look on the Glock, the angle of the connector here is just a little bit more rounded, a little bit more squared here. On the Ermox, is that going to make a big difference? I don't know. The big difference that I see is the length of the part of the trigger mechanism that connects to the striker itself. It's just a little bit longer on the Ermox than it is on the Glock. Not sure that's going to make a huge difference, but again, that's question then comes up in the compatibility of whether or not you're going to be able to change the trigger mechanism. I haven't tried it. But again, a lot of similarities, some differences up front, obviously, but everything in here looks pretty much Glock-like, so I'm guessing that this is pretty much a clone of the Glock Generation 3 and 4. Slides are a little bit different. Again, at first glance, they look the same. They both have captured dual spring recoil. system. Barrels look the same. In fact, I haven't tried it yet, but I have read that the Ermox will actually take Glock 19 barrels. Striker looks the same back here. The firing pin block is obviously much larger on the Ermox, but other than that, again, very, very similar. We get them back together. I do want to show another difference on it though. One other thing, going back to the frame, you see that the Glock has just the frame rails that are just, you know, less than a ½ inch long front and back, whereas the Ermox has a long rail all the way running pretty much on the frame, obviously not in the middle area, but much longer than a Glock. One of the things that I think contributes to a Glock's reliability is just not having a whole lot of frame rail to slide contact. I don't know if that's going to be a problem with the Ermox or not, but I'm not going to dunk it in mud to find out. All right, let's get these back together, and I'll show another difference here in a minute. All right, one thing that I've always liked about a Glock is the fact that it is not 100% cocked. You get a lot of guns that the striker's under 100% spring tension all the time. On a Glock, it's not. You can't really see it here, but that's one of the reasons for the spongy trigger pull in a Glock is it's only about 85% cocked, theoretically making it a little safer to carry. By the way, Ermox has taken, I don't know if it's a trademark or not, but they've taken it from Glock, calling the action in this a safe action. Well, that's what Glock was calling this way back in the 1980s when my department first adopted the Glock, was a safe action. Maybe something to do with that little tab on the trigger that's nothing but a drop safety. Anyway, here's where you can see some difference. This has a cocked indicator, much like the Canik and the HK-VP9 series, but on this you can see as you press the trigger that striker is actually coming back just a little bit, which makes this evident that the gun is only about 85% cocked, and it finally breaks right about there. And the trigger is where I have a problem with this gun. First of all, this thing is about a 6.5 pound trigger. Definitely not my favorite. It works, it's accurate enough, but I don't know if I can put a different connector in there to lighten it up or not. We're going to work on it. The other problem I have is the same problem I have on a Glock. Now, I like the shape of this trigger, where it does have a little bit of a hook at the bottom, but I tend to shoot with my finger all the way down to the bottom, and I'm actually pressing against the trigger guard as I'm working the trigger. That gets my finger as far away from the pivot point as possible, theoretically reducing the pull as much as possible. The problem I get is when I reset this, again, it's just like a Glock, but it actually pinches my finger, and I can really feel it pinching right under the trigger as it does the reset. And it got very uncomfortable after the first few shots, so therefore I had to adjust my finger position just a little bit higher. Now, a lot of people don't shoot like that anyway, so it's not going to be a problem. But if you're going to drag your finger along the trigger guard as you shoot, you're going to end up with pinch finger on reset. So raising my finger a little bit solved that problem. But again, 6.5 pound trigger pull, not at all fond of that. Actually, this turned out to be an accurate gun, and despite the difficulty in getting a precise sight alignment at any kind of distance. I'm going to be doing a follow-up review on the PSA Dagger here in the near future, and again, it's similarly budget-priced gun, and again, this is significantly less than a Glock. A really, really good budget price on this. I'm not going to get into price. You can find that on the internet if you need to, and I'm not trying to sell or market a gun here, just explaining it. But for a budget price gun, this turned out to be more accurate than my PSA Dagger. I haven't put an optic on this yet. I may at some point, although I won't have co-witness sights, which I kind of like with an optic. But it did the job. Now, when I first shot this thing, I put some 124 grain ammo through it at 15 yards. You can see it shot high left. Put some 115 grain ammo, same distance, same target. It wasn't quite as high or quite as much, well, almost as much to the left, but not quite as high, which is typical. And I know a lot of people think, well, heavier ammo is going to shoot lower. Well, at defensive or closer type distances, it actually shoots just a hair higher. There's a science behind it, which I'm not going to get into that. So I expected the 124s to shoot a little bit higher. The whole gun, though, shot high left. In order to change that, I would have to change the sights, which if I'm going to keep this, I may do anyway. But I can make it work all the way out to 50 yards. 12 yards, no big deal. In fact, I was even hitting a couple of 3-inch plates at 12 yards and running the plates with no problem. Get out to 25, and again, as long as I remember the gun shoots a little high left, I'm okay at 25. And once we get out to 50 yards, I did have to, again, aim a little bit low right now. You'll see several of the shots at 50 yards I did a center hold there, particularly on the 16-inch gong and also the 12-inch below it. I did a center hold on it, and you can see the impact went high left on both of those. So I did have to compensate a little bit when I shot the 10, the 8, and eventually even got the 6-inch plate with it. So even though those sights are a real pain to try to get precisely aligned, I did manage to make it work. Oh, one other thing about it before I get to that. When using a PMag, this slide would regularly lock back with one round left in the magazine.
This is on a PMag.
With a Glock magazine, didn't happen, and with the Glock Clone magazine that the gun came with, 2 of those by the way, then again I didn't have that issue. But with the PMag, it did occasionally lock back with one round still remaining, and I've seen other reviews said the same thing. So I said I had a complaint about the owner's manual, and I do. I mean, it's a decent owner's manual. It gives you all the basics, lets you record model, purchase date, all that kind of good stuff. It talks about the was it the 1 year, or excuse me, the warranty. I think it's a lifetime warranty on this, if I remember right, but don't quote me on it. But it doesn't say anything at all about, even the table of contents, it doesn't bring up anything at all about the optics plates. Obviously it has optics capability. You can see the cover plate on top, and it comes with 2 metal, by the way, not plastic, but 2 metal optics plates. Just doesn't give you any directions about which plate is used for which. Okay, you can figure out trial and error. And I think, but don't quote me on this, that, and I'm going to work on this with a future video, that it may be a way to mount the optic on this, a particular optic on this, without a plate, which would be real nice if you could. But anyway, nothing in the owner's manual at all that says anything about optics plates. All right, so it's a Glock Clone. It does feel real nice in the hand, a little heavier than a Glock. So far, and again, I've only got 100 rounds through this gun. Would I carry it? I'd carry it with iron sights. It's a defensive pistol. It's not anything that I'd want to use as a marksmanship pistol. All would probably work for IDPA, even in the iron sight class, because it's going to be accurate enough to get A-zone hits at most of their distances. For the price, it certainly works. Is it all going to be compatible with Glock parts? That is yet to be seen. I may try the trigger connector, see if I can reduce that 6.5 pound pull at some point. But meanwhile, the Ermox Defense X-Fire. By the way, the Ermox company in Turkey does make a lot of, at least their catalog shows a lot of interesting products, and I'd be anxious to get my hands on a couple of those coming up. I got a 5-shot revolving barrel or revolving cylinder 410 shotgun. Even got an over-under that's, I believe it's a 410 308 that they're working on. So a lot of interesting stuff coming up. Anyway, I'm not getting into the long term on Ermox Defense, but I do want to thank you for stopping by while we look at the Ermox Defense X-Fire budget Glock Clone with a metal frame. Interesting gun, and so far I think it's kind of underrated. I kind of like it. Thanks for stopping in.